But I want to learn more about you, why you decided to get into real estate investing. Because that's always, the question that people want to know, like what allowed you or what made you decide to do this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a good question. And, it's interesting, like, the question is, how far do you want to go back? And if you just want like a 30-second kind of overview of like where I come from and how I even got to Canada, and then that kind of set me off to real estate. But basically, I'm actually a refugee to Canada. I was not born here, and my parents came from the war. It's from the war in Yugoslavia in the 90s or in the early 90s.
Yep.
And it's honestly like it's a little bit of a miracle for me to come here and tell you about my story and about the success that I've had, because we had a lot of friends or family who didn't survive, who were stuck in the war, who were starving. And my parents got the last, bus out of the country as the economy was collapsing, as the banks were collapsing, as the bombs were dropping. Went to UK for a little bit and then came to Canada. And my parents were able to get good jobs, and they sacrificed a lot. So the fact that, I'm here investing in real estate, financial freedom, all that good stuff, we owe a lot to our parents, and how difficult, that really must have been. And that's why I'm always grateful to be in Canada, in this country. It's given us so much opportunity, and people, I think we take it for granted that we're so, we have so much safety and security here. And seeing the reality of my parents losing it all in the war, it really changes your perspective on things.
So how was life for them prior to the war? Like, were they living a good life over there? And were you born there, or were you born over here in Canada?
Yeah, so I was born there in Sarajevo, Bosnia,
Yeah.
and they had a pretty good life. At that time, Yugoslavia was doing very well economically. They were, it was like a socialist system. So it was really a mix. It wasn't pure capitalism. It wasn't pure communism. It was socialism, but it was doing very, very well. Everybody had a job. Everybody had an income. Most people, and we had a good life there from what little I can remember and from my parents told me. But the crazy thing is how fast the war came and how it just completely obliterated everything. Literally, bombs dropping overnight, and my parents, literally my mom doing whatever she could with two young children to just survive and escape the war. They lost all their life savings in the war, all the banks. I think they finally got some money back, after decades, which would be like peanuts compared to what they had. But banks collapsed, all of that kind of stuff. So, so it was definitely shocking. And but like I said, I'm very blessed and fortunate to be where I am today because of that. And my parents have the relentless, drive and pursuit to find something better, going from one country to another. It's not easy.
No, for sure. Okay, so you guys get here. You set up what shop is it in Toronto, or are you guys on the
In
outskirts?
Toronto.
In Toronto.
Yeah, in Toronto. And my parents, they were always working jobs. They were always working hard. My mom was, kind of the breadwinner.
Yep.
She worked in IT. She had a lot of, she graduated electrical engineering. She was very capable. My dad as well, he was an actor, like a puppet actor, in my country. So he's like a lot of actor, very arts focused. But as soon as he came here, he got into IT. He's really into IT right now as well. So both of them have very good jobs, right now. But when we first came to Canada, that wasn't the case. We would be considered, I guess, somewhat poor, or average, I would say, lower middle class. Always had food on our table, all of that kind of stuff. But didn't have the kind of passive income that I have today. Didn't have the kind of wealth that I have today. But one thing that my parents did really well was they actually bought a detached property in Toronto, and I still remember they paid 350,000, I believe, for that property. So that was like
That's
around 20
crazy.
years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
It's worth like 1.6 million now, and it's not even renovated fully.
Right.
So, they've made over $1 million on that investment, and that's, in my opinion, been their best investment. And that's also kind of what started opening my eyes about real estate, is seeing how
What year was
far the
that? What year was that? What, like, when your eyes started opening, and when did you actually get your first investment property?
Right. So I mean, as I was, going to school, I actually ended up going to University of Toronto at that time, and I could see the value of real estate going up. The thing that really piqued me was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think a lot of people read that book, and it opens their eyes to, the possibility of having passive residual income from real estate. And I think it's also the fact that I was, even though I saw how hard my parents worked, I always wanted to be a business owner. I always wanted to have, passive residual income. My goal wasn't to just, get a paycheck, get a pension, and retire in 30 years. And I didn't like having a boss. I didn't like people telling me what to do, my schedule, going into the office, all that kind of stuff. So it was around university when I really started figuring out, like, how am I going to do this? Like, what am I going to do? And I ended up getting a job. I was interning a lot in university, so I had a lot of work experience. While my friends were out like partying and stuff, I was working a lot. I always had, jobs or side hustles. I was always doing something to make money. And the shift for me was when I was getting close to graduating university. I realized that I didn't want to get a traditional job. Like, that wasn't what I wanted out of life. I wanted to own a business. And even though I know I needed a job at the beginning, that's really when I started diving deep in real estate, doing a lot of education. And I pretty much, it was kind of fast how I bought my first property. I bought it at 24 years old, and that property has literally like set me up for, all the other properties that I bought. It's in Toronto as well, so it's appreciated, very, very well. But I had to make sacrifices to get to that first property. And this is what I tell people: is if you don't make the sacrifice now, or a conscious decision now, your life is going to be harder later.
Right.
Right? So do the things that are hard now so that your life can be easier later.
Yeah.
And the hard thing for me was, so I graduated university, I got a job. I actually ended up going through a couple of jobs just trying to get a higher salary. Ended up landing a really good six-figure job. So I was in IT as well, as a project manager, making good money. It was very stressful, lots of hours. As a consultant, as opposed to a full-time employee, the expectation is very high. You're basically always working, like 10-hour plus days. And what was interesting was, at that time, my current wife, like my wife right now, we were just dating at that time, just kind of out of university. We consciously made a decision, because I moved out of my parents' house, consciously made a decision to rent the cheapest apartment that we could find in Toronto. And the reason we did that was because I knew that if I was able to save some money, even if it was for a year or two, this wasn't a long-term, play that we're looking in terms of renting for a long time. I just know I needed, I wanted to not live at home. I wanted to move out on my own with my girlfriend at the time. And we found the cheapest apartment we could find. I still remember the look on my mom's face when she saw it. I think we were paying something like $600 or $700 a month for a one bedroom, 500 square foot on the Danforth.
Right. What year was
And
this?
man, it's so 7 years ago I bought my first house.
Yeah.
So before then, so like maybe 8, 9 years ago. And I still remember, my mom was like, "Why are you living here?" It's like, it was kind of like like a little bit of a dirty apartment building. The actual apartment was fine. It was basic. It was small, but I know that's what was going to get there. And sure enough, we lived there for a year and a half. And then I bought my first property. So that was kind of like, that sacrifice, that decision that I was talking about
Right.
earlier, and that allowed us to get the first property. But the first property wasn't as a result of me saving a lot of money. Even though I saved a lot of money in that short time frame for my job, and I spent very little money at that time, I had enough in savings where I was like, okay, if something were to happen, if I were to lose my job, I'd be okay for a little while. But I didn't have enough for savings plus the down payment, right? That was always a challenge. How do I get that down payment? So
Right.
I figured out that I could actually borrow money for the down payment. I didn't think that this was possible before. I actually didn't know about it, but I was always under the impression I had to save money for a down payment, but I never thought about the idea of borrowing money from the down payment. So I actually borrowed $30,000 through a loan, personal loan, and that was 5% down on the $400,000 fixer-upper bungalow that we bought in Scarborough.
Mhm.
So we
And
bought
now,
that for
and
400.
where did you borrow those funds from? Was it private funds? Was it friends, family?
It was the bank.
It was the
So it
bank.
was the bank. So yeah,
Okay.
so I literally went in there. I said, I just want a personal loan or a personal line of credit. I basically got whatever I could at that point. And it ended up being, 30,000 was the amount that I got. And it was literally like, that's exactly 5% down on a property at 400,000, which was, the properties at that time for a fixer upper detached bungalow.
Right. And you know what? And I think that's a good point, right? Because I think a lot of people think that they have to have the money themselves to do this, right? And so you're obviously sharing a story of where you were able to get that money loaned to you through either a line of credit. It could have been potentially even a family or a friend, but you don't have to have the money to get in, right? Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And so you buy that first home. It's a bungalow. Now, are you doing a house hack with this? What do you end up doing with this particular property?
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, during this whole time I'm researching, I'm doing real estate investing, education. So I went to a lot of Scott McGelvray's courses and workshops, and I did all that stuff,
Yeah.
whatever I could find. Now there's way more information, way more young people coming out. But house hacking at that time, it was just starting to come out. People were just starting to talk about it. And the basement. One thing that I learned with Scott McGelvray's is the basement accessory apartment, the SDU, ADU, whatever you want to call it, but essentially making another apartment in the basement usually of a bungalow, for example. So we literally bought a property that was in like the most original. I wouldn't say run down condition. It was actually very well kept. It was a probate sale, so the person passed away, and it was all original. But I knew it needed a lot of work. But the main thing was I was looking at ceiling heights, I was looking at secondary entrance, I was looking at egress windows, I was looking at laundry rooms, all this kind of stuff. So we literally bought the house not because it was like our dream house or something else. Again, it was another stepping stone. So like the apartment was a stepping stone to the first house. I knew that this first house was a stepping stone to this house where I currently am, which is like a brand new dream house that we built here.
Right.
So
Now, before
with
you
that
go
first,
on, though, explain what
yeah,
house hacking is, because not everybody knows what it is.
sure. House hacking, and there's a couple different ways you can do it, but the general concept is this. Instead of your living situation being a constant liability, which means it generates zero income,
Hmm.
right? You're going to try to find some way to generate income. Now, the one that I recommend for people is to create two separate apartments, like I did with like a basement apartment. But, if you're, for example, you can house hack your own apartment. If you rent like a 3-bedroom apartment and you have like 2 roommates, that's a form of house hacking. Or if you just buy a single family home, let's say you can't create a basement apartment, and you just rent out a few rooms, it's still a form of house hacking. It's just how do you get income out of your house, which is generally a liability. The reason we say it's a liability is because it provides no cash flow, right? So that's the number one thing that allowed me to achieve financial freedom, allowed me to quit my job a lot faster than normal, and allowed me to pick up a lot more properties, is simply by house hacking that first house. I was living mortgage free at 24 years old, and it was amazing. And ever since then, I got hooked.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because I know for me, before where I am today, I always thought that my house that I live in was an asset, right? So my financial advisor would come over and they'd say, okay, what are your assets? Well, your home, your car, they put your car down as an asset. And so you're saying something completely different. You're saying, no, 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 hold on a second. That home that you live in is a liability, but you transformed it into an asset by renting it out, right?
Exactly. And like I'm at a different, I guess different level of my life now where I can afford a big nice liability. I can afford nice liabilities, but they're all being afforded by cash flow, by assets, by income generating businesses, right? So the number one people make this mistake is they buy liabilities with income that they have to earn every month. So they essentially become a slave to their property. They become a slave to their house, to their cars, whatever. And then it's all about keeping up with the Joneses and who has the newest Mercedes lease and this and that. I saw that all in my work,
Right.
right? So I knew that wasn't the path that was going to get me there. And even though I can afford those things now, and it's nice to have a nice house and a nice car and all this stuff, it's not the number one thing that's most important. Money isn't the number one thing that's most important. The most important thing is time and having
Mhm.
freedom. And that's what I can say I have with my life right now is I can do a podcast with you today. I can work a bit on my business if I want to, or I can spend all day with my kids. That's the ultimate financial freedom that we're talking about. And the fundamental is understanding that your house, is not an asset unless it provides some sort of cash flow, or unless you have other cash flowing, ideally passive income businesses that can pay for your liabilities,
Right.
right?
So you're saying really what's the most important to you is return on time. Like would
Where
you?
that's where I'm at today. When obviously
Yep.
when I was earlier, it
Yep.
was it was all about I have time, I don't have much money, so I renovated. Like that first bungalow that we bought ourselves. We probably put in $100,000 worth of sweat equity. So I literally made $100,000 by putting in my sweat into renovating, and I knew nothing about renovating. Again, it's all about learning new skills, get becoming a better person essentially, and learning new things. So I learned how to renovate because at that time I didn't have any money, to hire contractors. Now I have a team, I have contractors, I have people. So, that when you grow your business, you can automate it. But at the beginning, if you're starting out with, like, so many people say like, oh, I don't have money. It's like, well, then you have time. It's either time or money. You can either
Mm.
buy some time with money, or you can put in some work and make some money, with your time. So it's whatever your current your current time worth is, and in your goals, right? Like I could work if I wanted to 100 hours a week and make millions of dollars and do all this stuff, but that's not what makes me happy. What makes me happy is having the freedom and spending time with my family, and sharing information like this and giving back.
Right.